Hi, welcome to another amazing episode on Ambukisha, where I interview people that I admire and want to hear more about how they live their lives, who they are as a person, what they believe. Today's guest, someone I absolutely admire. At just 22 years old, he's already authored over 15 books, and I have in my hands the 15th book, which is what we're going to be talking about with him, Obadiah Kariuki, an activist, a youth, and a leader. Before we start, I want to read something here from the book, The Dedication. To the brave youths that succumbed to death during the nationwide protests, let their innocent souls rest in eternity. To the fearless and bold youths who are hungry for change, this episode is for you. Oba,
Yes, sir.
welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for making the time.
Asante.
Thank you for my copy of the book,
Yes.
Riot,
Uh-huh.
Kenya's New Dawn. Loyalty and Leadership Under Test,
Mhm.
The Kenya We Want versus the Kenya There Is, by Obadiah Kariuki Jr.
Mhm.
Is Junior part of your name, or is that something you just for artistic reasons?
Obadiah Kariuki Jr. is a junior person. My uncle is called Kariuki Sr. So in my cultural heritage, we like to inherit the names of the people that we admire. And as you've said, you admire the people that come to your show. And as you've also said, Kariuki Sr. is a man that I also embody, a man that I admire, and a man that has molded me to be the person that I am today.
Okay.
Yes.
And the man you are today is an author, an artist, a very creative person. While reading through your book, I felt a lot of courage coming from you as an author to me as a reader. Tell me, who's Obadiah?
Let me take you back to where the story began. So at the age of 16 years old, I was in Form 3 at that time. It was during the corona pandemic, and we were watching the news headline at home. And during the news headline, something popped up during the show that 2020 has received the highest number of teenage pregnancies. So my first book is dubbed Early Pregnancies, Be the Change Agent. So the book is a societal book, talking so much about the teenage pregnancies, on the tendencies in which young girls are wanted to fall into early marriages, the area of FGM, genital marriages, female circumcision, and that has been derived so much into that perspective whereby I felt that as much as I don't have a sister, I don't have a daughter, but I have a mother somewhere, I have an auntie somewhere, I have a cousin who is also a young girl, and so I pursue that is going to be a great tremendous thing that I'm supposed to do to my generation, and that is where my journey of authorship began. I've authored 15 books right now at the age of 22. I was privileged to launch my 22nd my at the age of 22. I was in a position to launch my first political civic educational book dubbed Rise or Riot. So it is a book that I really embody so much because on some of the things that I'm doing right now in the area, in the space of society, as a young Pan-Africanist, as a trained photojournalist, now as an author, as an established writer, I foresaw that that is going to be a great spectrum or a great opportunity or a space for me to be in a position to endeavor some of the problems, some of the situations that the young people are facing through this country. Yes.
Thank you so much. Rise or Riot. I like how you describe yourself, as a photojournalist, as a Pan-African.
Yeah.
There is, in this book, you're very direct, and there are things that you just call out directly. What made you write the book? What do you want to address in Kenya?
For example, I was taught by my father that never go shortcuts. Any person who mwenye anadanga shortcut, he or she is in a position to fall, or his or her glory is going to fall out. So I believe that as a writer, that kitabu ni kioo cha jamii, and I felt that if I'm not in a position to address my writings in a in a confidence way, in a way that my readers are going to be in a position to understand that the message that I'm supposed to send to them is going to be a partake of some of the things that they are going through. For example, for me to be so direct into this book, it is because that lives have been lost during the 2024 youth ile mashida mayouth alipitia kwenye maandamano, the demonstrations, yes. And I foresaw that if I'm not going to be in a position to address some of the problematic situations that the youth are going through, then I felt that I'm not going to represent my situations. I'm not going to represent the problems that the people are going through. And therefore, I felt that if I go in a situation whereby I'm straight to the point, I hit the nail on the head, then I believe that that is the good way that we're going to call out these people who are giving us the problems. Yes.
Yeah. I only had one challenge reading your book.
Yeah.
So the introduction starts with, listen up, Gen Z. I'm not a Gen Z.
Yes.
I'm a millennial.
Uh-huh.
But it seems to me that there's also a message that you had for Gen Zs. There are places I felt you talked to me as a millennial, and there are places I felt I had you talk to all the generations in this country.
Yes.
But that line made me think you are primarily talking to Gen Zs. What did you want to tell your fellow Gen Zs?
For example, I know I've been having a lot of setbacks in terms of breaking down the generation spectrum and to direct the people as to why, how are they going to be in a position to read the book, yet the introductory part I'm addressing about the Gen Zs. Let me now phrase that in a circumferential way that right now the Gen Zs, they are the people who stood up and they demonstrated, they went to the road to represent other generations that were suffering in silence. For example, in my generation, I believe that we have the freedom to demonstrate, we have the freedom to speak up for ourselves, either in terms of singing, verbal speaking, in terms of writing, just the way that I did, and to others through sign language, whereby they write their emotions by signs of language. And I felt that if the Gen Zs were in a position to come out in large numbers and be a partaker of other generations that were suffering, then I felt that yes, I have to recognize that for this revolution that has been a part of our society, that has been a part of our constitution, that has been a part of this liberating this country, that I felt that the movement was birthed by the Gen Zs. And that is why I felt that to other millennials, to other Gen X, to other Gen Boomers, I felt that they were all represented by the confidence that the Gen Zs partook and went to the streets and speak out for their rights and freedoms. Yes, and that is why I foresaw that is going to be a great move for me to represent and demonstrate their willingness to come out in the streets, and not just in the streets, but in other particular ways, either in the area of acumen of business, in the area of entrepreneurship, in the area of politics, in the area of artistical things. I feel that the Gen Zs have come out in large numbers to represent their skills, and that is why I see that the movement was birthed by the Gen Zs. Yes.
Yeah, the Gen Z movement was definitely a great thing. And as a millennial, thank you to your generation. Thank you to every Gen Z. And here, you speaking and you being a Gen Z, and I can take you as a representative in that sense. There's a lot of courage again that I see that where you are able to just say some of the things that you take that the older generations have not been willing to say.
Yeah.
And then there are places where you speak directly to these older generations. What do you have to say to me as a millennial and other millennials, to Gen X, to boomers? What do you have to say to the other generations to make them a part of your movement?
The calling shot to other generation is that they step up or they step aside, because I feel that they were given the opportunity, they were granted their rights to come out and speak on behalf of their own generations. And I felt that their silence has also generated to some of the problems that we've suffered as a country and as a society. I felt that if these the tendencies that the Gen Zs have come out, if that is a spectrum that they took, especially when we were during the colonial era, yes, I congratulate the Mau people who fought for our country, but I felt that they were only fighting for the freedom of this country. And as for the Gen Zs, we are now given a freedom mentally, decolonizing our mindset. And I felt that as the young people, as the Gen Zs, I felt that the other generations that were before them, they necessarily did their part, but they never did it so well. I'm not questioning some of the things that I did. No, as a young person, as a young brother to them, as a son, of course, as a brother, and also as a nephew, I feel that their silence has brought us to this prison because we're living in a yes, we were in a freedom, we call it a democratic country, but I feel sisi tuko jela mentally, and I feel that as the Gen Zs, their message was very simple: to decolonize our mindset. And that is why, as you read the book, to some of the people that have been in a position to read this book, they're in a position to question that. I'm not necessarily reading to read, but I feel that you are quickening my mind to be in a position to understand the freedom, the rights, some of the rights that I felt that nikiziongea, I'm going to be taken as a slave, or to other situations whereby they feel that it is not necessarily to talk. For example, let me just give a quick example. In the past, you were not in a position to talk about sexual activities with your parents. But as for the Gen Zs, we comfortably talk about sex with our parents, which is a ritual thing. But in the past, it was more of a sinful activity whereby you're not even in a position to term the word sex. But right now, it is there. Academically, it is there. Digital is there. And when we engage with our friends, with our families, that is an area whereby now it has been exposed to the public, and it has been seen not as a sinful activity, but it is there to educate us. And that is why one particular time I was trying to write a proposal to the Ministry of Education that sex education has to be emulated to schools. Because I felt that when I was writing that book about early pregnancies, I felt that the key partakers to why the young girls are prone to teenage pregnancies is because they lack the knowledge about sex. So, sex education, if it is going to be formulated in schools, then it is going to be much easier for them to be in a position to understand their rights sexually. And that is where unakuta kama saizi, the area of GBV, right now women and young girls are standing up for their rights because they've been emulated, they've been educated, they've been wameongeleshewa sana with the society. And that is why I foresaw that is going also to be a great opportunity to emulate sex education to be a skill, either as a subject or also as a formula, as to in a position that they're going to read and understand some of the rights, some of the ways as to why they have to do sex, when, how, and why. And that is why I feel that the Gen Zs have stood up so brightly, so courageously, confidently, and that is, I believe, that is a generation that everyone aspires to be. And that is why unakuta, for example, mtu ako 70 lakini anajiita Gen Z. So you are wondering, why are they emulating the Gen Z? Because they felt that the confidence, the aroma as to why they emulated some of the things that nobody was in a position to question. For example, no one is in a position to question the presidency. That is the highest hierarchy of a political position. But the Gen Zs, they confronted that position courageously. Then that means that if they're in a position to confront such an executive position, then it means they are also going to be in a position to engage in a broader way, not necessarily in the area of politics, but in the area of governance, accountability, African affairs, also in the area of digitalization, in the area of marketing strategies, and all other professional agencies and bodies that are in a position to work. And I felt that not necessarily the Gen Zs, because at 35 you're a millennial. So I believe it is not only the Gen Zs, but also in the gap between 18 to 35 who are embodied as the youth, the young people of this country. Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Where does that courage come from? Like, confront the presidency. This is the highest seat of the land. This is I think, where there's the most concentration of power in one person. Where does the youth, the Gen Zs particularly, but even you personally as an author, where does that courage to confront that power directly, to call it to question, to call it to accountability? And there's a place in the book where you say that power is trying to convince us that our voice is futile, and that speaking up is futile, and that resistance will lead to death. Where do you find the courage, knowing all those things, to still decide, I'm going to speak up, I'm going to speak directly, and I'm going to hold everyone in power accountable?
I believe that confidence is an act of character. And I believe that if your character is in fact, God hates a fearful person. And actually, it is abbreviated that a fearful person will not be in a position to enter into heaven. And therefore, I believe that everyone is in a position to emulate character. As much as you feel that whatever you're doing is not bad, then that means that whatever you feel is right for you, it might not necessarily be right for you or to other people. But I feel that a change has to be as a partake of what you believe in, because vision are backed by the independence of an individual person. And therefore, if you feel that whatever that you're going to back, for example, let me give an example. A child is born not because the mother is pushing, but because of the confidence that the mother has, because she wants to celebrate someone that she has carried for 9 good months. I want you to picture that a mother is giving birth, yet she's in fear. She's not in a position to have the courage to give birth to that child. Then that means that that child will not be born, or rather the child might be born, but the child might lack some air to breathe, and he or she might die. So that is an example to emulate that you might have the courage. If mothers are in a position to have the courage to give birth to children, then what does it mean to have the courage to speak out for a society, to speak out for a generation, to speak out for a country, to speak out for a continent? And in my previous generation, we had our great grandfathers who fought for our country, who fought for the liberation of this country in the area of freedom. Then that means that their aroma of spirit, the spirit that they birth to liberate this country, to make this country a colonized nation, a colonized country, then that means that it is something that is also birthed from the remnants of our great grandfathers. And I also feel that for me personally, it is also it is a personal identification of some of the things that I've personally witnessed, that I've personally seen, and that I've also been in a position to encounter. And I felt that if you're not going to be courageous enough to understand what it feels to be right for you and within your inner circle, then it feels that what is your purpose in this life? When you're fighting for something, whether you want to be in a position to buy a car, you need to have the courage to go to a car hire. You buy that car, to the yard. If you're in a position to buy that new clothes, where do you go? You have to get that confidence. And confidence, it is not just a matter of speaking. It is not a matter of thinking. It is also a matter of deciding. So character that is birthed through deciding inakuanga poa sana, because you feel that it has come from within you. You're not pushed, you're not forced, you're not threatened, and you're not also in a position to do it because you're not willingly to do. And therefore, I feel if you are in a position to fill the space of creating an impact in the society, then it means you need to have that courage. Because at the end of the day, I remember one person telling me that I'd rather die well on a vision than to live with no mission. Yes.
So that means to embrace the possibility as some of the Gen Zs did on the streets, that this could end in death. And for some Gen Zs, it did.
Yeah.
And what does that do to your generation when you see some of people your own age, some younger, die standing up for their freedom?
For example, while we were trying to liberate this country, while the 2024 financial bill was being read in the National Assembly, lives were lost, innocent lives to be precise. And I remember one particular time while we were demonstrating, people were shot dead. And I remember one particular person raising his voice so high, saying that we are not grieving, we were raising heroes and heroines who were shot dead on the streets. And I recall very well that the biggest tragedy that led to the loss of the young people, it is because the vision that the Gen Zs had, some of the positions that they were in a position to acquire, it was acquired by the state, by those the political brokers, the economical brokers. And also I felt that the greatest reason as to why the vision of the Gen Zs were not fulfilled is not because they were not courageous, but because their vision was snatched. It was stolen by the big headed people. And that is why I feel if we're in a position to continue speaking up for our country, regardless of how because now the vision seems to be a thin air, which is good because I feel that maybe in the coming years, the coming days ahead, I feel that maybe the Gen Zs are going to be relevant. But I feel that when you emulate some of the things, some of the visions that were acquired, and you push it now as an individual, as an institution, as an ungovernmental organization, as a human rights body, then I feel that you don't have now to speak for a whole generation. You now need to speak to an individual, whereby you do door to door talks, whereby you do civic education, whereby you engage with the public, either in podiums, in conferences, in events, while boarding a matatu, while boarding a boda boda, and you speak and you emulate some of the things that the Gen Zs were trying to fight, because I feel it was snatched away by people who had the state machinery, people who had money, people who had higher authoritative dic- dictatorship, to be precise. And I felt that right now it is high time now to speak courageously to our people in area of writing, in area of art, in area of singing. And I believe that right now, regardless of where we are as a state, where we are as a country, where we are as a county, we need to have those fallen soldiers, people who are willingly to die for their country, to die for their nation, because I believe that even when people were trying to colonize our country, not everyone showed up to colonize our country. Kuna wale great grandfathers walikuwa tu club wakianguka nayo, but kuna wale wenye wali show up courageously, they fought with the colonialists, with the whites, and I believe that not everyone is going to be a partaker of liberating this country, but there's a blood that is going to be shed, people are going to be prisoned, people are going to be shot dead, others are going to be jailed, others the consequential freedom, the consequential rights that will emulate other people to enjoy the freedom that they have fought for. Because I believe that right now, if a great grandfather who was shot dead trying to liberate this country or to be in a position to emulate this country to be colonized, yet he or she is in a grave somewhere, anaweza penduka akiamka aone the state of this country right now. Maybe ako pale kwa grave akipenduka aseme, is this the Kenya that I fought for? Is this the Kenya that I wanted to be right now? Is this the third state of a country that I wanted it to be right now? Is this a corrupt nation that I was willingly to fight for? If I felt that this is a country that I wanted to emulate right now, then I feel I shouldn't have fought for this country. Ni heri ningekula tu kale kashamba nilibai time ya Moi ya Kenyatta, nikula na wajukuu na watoi, nilikuta tu kismart. But right now, I died trying to fight for a country that I was trying to show that my great grandchildren will be in a position to enjoy the freedom and the rights and the consequential problems and the fight that I fought for. So I feel that as a country, we are also not trying to please the people that came before us to fight for our country, but to the few who are trying so much, so heartedly to fight so much for this country, either in the area of economical freedom, political freedom, social freedom, health-wise freedom, and other freedoms that are seen and others are not seen. The impact, necessarily, it is about the impact that we impact to someone. That is what I feel matters so much. And that is why I'm saying that right now, we might not speak about a generation, but it is about the impact that an individual has impacted to his or her society.
From the struggle of a generation to conversations between individuals. This is a conversation that I'm really enjoying. I'm learning a lot, talking to a Gen Z, someone who's taken time to articulate their thoughts and their experiences in this book, Rise or Riot. When we come back, we start to have some of those individual conversations that Obadiah talked about that we need to start to have as a country. See you shortly. Welcome back. Still here with Obadiah Kariuki, the author of Rise or Riot, Kenya's New Dawn. And we've gone through some of the things that he's experienced as a Gen Z, some of the stuff he's articulated in his book. And he's mentioned to us that conversations that need to happen next are conversations between individuals in our own communities, in our own initiatives, whether one starts a CBO, whether one is going through their job in a matatu, on a border, or some other place, that those conversations are probably what is going to move this nation forward. And that's what we're going to be talking about next. Oba?
Yes.
Before we start that conversation, I have a very personal question,
Yeah.
but it's also part of that conversation because it's my own individual experience. I sometimes feel like a coward. And those people that are fearful and will not see heaven, probably one of them. So I know I'm not alone in this country.
Definitely.
And people who are just fearful, people who've been raised to fear power, to fear authority, not just respect it, but to really be very subservient around power and authority and force and might and kind of even state machinery. What do you say people like me, like I come to you and I say, Oba, I see your book and I see a lot of courage in here, but I personally am scared. I don't know if I can do what you do. What do you say to someone like that?
So let me speak to the coward people. Right now, let me take you back to a country that is fearing the state, a country that is fearing the presidency. For example, let me take you to a country like Uganda, or precisely a country like Tanzania, they recently did the election, and as you saw, lives were lost because they thought that trying to please the presidency is a waste of time. It is because of our votes that the presidency is in a position to acquire the power and the state of the three arms of government, for example, in Tanzania and also here in Kenya. And I feel that you have to ignite the pressure that you have as a citizen, not necessarily because you're a coward, but maybe because you've not been civically educated for you to be in a position to understand your rights and your freedoms. For example, as I had told you earlier, from next week or next week after, I'm going to be filing a petition at the High Court of Kenya to give an exercise that the Constitution has to be a mandatory subject in both primary and secondary schools. Why am I doing that? Because I feel we like calling ourselves patriotic citizens. But not everyone is in a position to understand what it means to be a patriotic citizen. For me, I believe being a patriotic citizen necessarily is not because about you're a Kenyan citizen and all that, but because you are also in a position to understand the rules, the rights, and the laws of your land, whereby you call yourself a patriotic citizen. And I felt that when constitution is made a mandatory subject, it is going to engage so much with the students, with the pupils whom we think and I believe that they're going to be the future leaders. Now let me phrase it that way. Right now in the 13th Parliament, we have so many legislatures who don't even understand the constitution. They've never even taken their time to read the constitution. Because I also believe that during the 844 system, the old curriculum of education, there was nothing like that. But right now, during the new CBC, I also believe that constitution has to be a mandatory subject in in our schools, and it is going to engage so highly with them, and is going to be a vibrant thing for them to be in a position to emulate the skills, and they're going to fight for their country, not necessarily just going to the streets, but going understanding the rights and the laws of their country. And also to take you prior to that, during the 2024 the 2024 demonstrations, a lot of the young people went to the streets not understanding as to why they're in the streets. Because I felt that we were talking about the financial bill, but not around 80%, just to gauge, they never read the financial bill. They just came out as a way of trying to work with the people that were in a position to read and understand the finance bill. Yes, it was so easy for them to understand a bit of the act in in the financial bill, either in the area of technology, whereby ulikuwa unakuta kama Ruto kuna tax anaongeza, inakuwa easier for them through the technology. But I feel that we are too ignorant to understand the rights and the freedoms of our country. And when you teach a class 6 or a grade 6 the constitution, it is going to be of a higher norm for them to be in a position to understand their country so very well, whereby they're going to call out for their country, they're going to call out for their leaders who are corrupt, who are enticing the taxes that they've paid for their services to be worked upon. And I feel that we are too ignorant. Also, the other generations, they were also not in a position to work so hard to liberate this country because they were too ignorant to understand the rights and the freedoms of this country. And all other laws, they are articulated in the constitution. And I feel that when such a move is geared upon and it is made a mandatory subject, it is going to be of ease for them to be in a position to understand their country. Let us talk about the first world countries. Constitution is a mandatory subject in their schools. And to others, it is not a mandatory subject, but some of the articles, some of the act, some of the laws that have been articulated in the constitution, it is a mandatory area in the area of teaching, whereby you can call your leader who is corrupt because you've been in a position to understand what it means to have a corrupt leader in your country. For example, in other countries, the constitution has emulated that once you get a corrupt leader, they are sentenced to death. The Treasonous Act. For example, the Treasonous Act is in the constitution. I want to gauge that maybe a 10 years old child or a 10 or a 12-year-old kid is in a position to understand that in the news headline, if they're in a position to see that a corrupt leader has been seen or has been identified, then in their minds, because in their schools, their class teacher or their subject teacher has taught them that when you identify a corrupt leader, what next after that? They're sentenced to death, sentenced to prison, and to others, they are hanged to death. So I feel that we are too ignorant to understand our constitution. For example, it is so easy for me to understand a lyrics of a song, of a trending song, than to read a page or a chapter of a constitution. Why? Because we are too ignorant and we say, it doesn't bother me. If it doesn't bother you, then who does it bother us to? Because I feel, and at the end of it, we still identify ourselves as being a patriotic citizen. How can you be a patriotic citizen yet you are too ignorant even to understand your constitution? For example, we go to church carrying a Bible. The Islamic, they emulate their teachings with the Quran, then it means that we also have to emulate our civic right by understanding the Constitution. And the Constitution has to be a mandatory subject, and it is going to be of ease for the students and for our future leaders to be in a position to understand what it means to be in a democratic country, to be in a rightful country whereby, as much as I feel I have the freedom to exercise my duties and my rights in other particular areas, there's a border, there is an extension as to which I can't go beyond, I can't go against, because I also feel that if if a constitution is going to be a mandatory subject, then I also feel that almost 98% of our civic education is going to be tackled in the constitution, because I also feel that in the assembly, either the county, national, or in the Senate Assembly, they emulate the constitution, the act of order. I know unasikizanga hizo vitu, kuna order Mr. Speaker, order this, order that, order. They emulate their rights, because that is a building of rights. It is a building of order. Then does it mean that our country is not a nation of order? Because to them, they undertake their legislation duties through understanding the rights of the Constitution and the Parliamentary Act that they've been assigned to. Then I also feel it is also going to be of highest order for us citizens to be in a position to be educated constitutionally.
So what I'm getting is that civic education, understanding my rights, knowing the Constitution, that these are some of the things that one can undertake to start to overcome their own fear.
Yes.
There's a contrast there for me, because when you're talking and you're educating me civically, and I started by saying I am scared.
Yeah.
The more you talk about these civic rights, the more scared I get. And I think there's a part of it where you say that power can label one. Like,
Yeah.
if I'm too courageous, power can just label me treasonous and start trying me, start witch hunting and all that. How do you think about stuff like that? And because I think that is the challenge that I personally have, where we're talking to an individual now.
Yes.
As you said, like, it was a movement for a generation, but the time has come for us to talk individual to individual and to have these conversations. So when I hear what you're telling me, and my emotion is fear.
Yeah.
But then you talk to me like, Kariuki, you need to educate myself civically, and you start to give me all these facts about constitutional rights and all that. And my fear grows even more, because I have to think about myself as an individual, you as an individual, my family as an individual. What do you think is blocking us from embracing the same kind of courage that you have, especially in writing this book?
For example,
sorry.
Yes.
Me, personally, what is blocking me from having the same kind of courage?
Okay. For example, do you fear when you pay taxes? Do you fear when the looters eat the money that you've been paid for your services to be acted upon?
I get angry.
You get angry, of course. Then that anger is what births confidence. It is what births the necessity for you to be in a position or to speak out for your own rights. Because I also feel that ukibebo ufala sana, it gets to a point whereby your emotions are stirred, and not get to a point whereby you have to protect, you have to stand up for your own rights. Because, for example, I recall one particular time I was buying a mahindi choma. Nilikuwa na buy mahindi in the streets. So venye nimekaakaa, huyo msee wa mahindi ananiambia, majenzi hamkutokea, hamkufanya nini, hamkupiga kura. And then I was like, I was too reluctant to understand why that particular individual is angry. He might be angry because akona shida zake za home. But in the area of economically, the economy has punched his business maybe, or rather it has punched his pocket, because the services that the services that he was to be acted upon has not been rightfully acted upon. And maybe I felt that he was angry because the Gen Zs never showed up to vote. And that is why I feel that youth might be in fear, which is it's a normal thing. You can't be courageous and you can't be brave in everything. But the highest question has to be, do you have that right? Do you have that vote to cast out those people silently? Because when we vote, we do it silently without necessarily speaking out. Maybe how the human rights organizations speak out, even in the court, in the streets, maybe in podiums, in boardrooms, and all that. But the question has to be: yes, you fear, but do you have that vote to cast out that person who is making you angry silently without necessarily having that publicity to show that I'm angry? So now another problem that we are facing as a country. I remember I recall there's a quote I have written: "You are not, now to the young people, you are not sexy if you're not going to vote." I had to term the word sexual because that is the language that the young people understand so much without quoting the Bible. For example, if you organize a particular section of the young people, wakalisha pale chini, and then you start citing Bible verses, they're going to sleep. But when you confront them in a sexual manner, they're going to be in a position to embrace and understand what maybe you wanted to sell your ideas to them. Because I feel this is a special generation, a generation whereby I feel that you have to go under their conditions. You have to understand them in a very circumferentially way. Because I also feel that for me to be in a position to courageously write such a code, it is because I'm also a young person. And for me to be in a position to speak out to the young people, at times it bids me to be in a position to embrace certain activities, certain norms sexually. When they go to TikTok, there's so much, their attention is carried away sexually. For example, also in that book, I've also emulated something to do with embracing so much of naked slutness than to identify the rights of our constitution. For example, weak knees and strong knees. For example, right now we are being ruled by weak-kneed leaders. At the end of it, you're going to be in a position to understand what it means to be a weak-kneed leader. I want to emulate some of the leaders that have programmated their countries from third world countries to upper second world countries or to first world countries. For example, this current administration has been talking so much about making Kenya the next Singapore. But I feel that the Kenyan leaders, maybe they went to the wrong seminar. How can you compare a country like Singapore, whereby they invested so much with their citizens, while a country like Kenya, whereby they are looting to emphasize or to stimulate their own personal bank accounts? Then how are you going to be in a position to steer a third world country to a first world country whereby you spend billions of money on travel luxury? At times you don't need to think whether you have the brains or not, but in a simple way, as much as you fear to call out for your act. In that news headline, unaangalia travel, ile pesa imetumiwa ya travel, it is worth to construct a road outside your gate. Yet you don't want to call out for your rights, yet you feel that economically you're being pinched and punched, whereby maybe you used to eat proteins from Monday to Monday. Now you have to cut short your own hygiene because economically the country is not working so well. So that is why I'm trying to sophisticate it in an individual manner, because I feel if I spread the message to you, then you're going to be in a position to spread the message to another person. And I also feel that ukispread hii message ni kama ugonjwa, it spreads so fast. But when you if all of us are not going to be in a position to call out for this rigorous regime or rigorous government, then I feel that nothing is going to be changed. And the more we shut up, the more they speak up. And the more they speak up, the more money is being looted, the more business deals are being acquired in those boardrooms. The more we shut up, the more they speak up, and they bring some of their rigorous bills to protect the businesses, to protect the enterprises, to protect their interest. Now, if you keep quiet, who is going to fight for your own interest? If they're in a position to speak for their own interest, then it means you have your own constitutional mandate to speak for your own rights. You can do it maybe by writing the way I did, through singing, speaking out, creating a show like this to engage with the people and for them to be in a position to understand what it takes to speak out. Because I also feel that during the Gen Z's demonstration, tuliwatotomesha. They felt the wave and they felt the punch that as of now, if we don't do what it takes to speak for your own rights, then we shall be a complaining country. We shall now not be a democratic country. Yes.
And that to me is your answer to the question, who's watching the watchers?
Yes.
You say we have systems, and we have systems like the Anti-Corruption Commission and other oversight bodies that are supposed to be watching and making sure that there is not corruption, that everything is working right, and people are not enriching themselves at the expense of the public. But then you ask, who should be watching the watchers? And your answer in the book to that question is that you and I, the audience, everybody that's a citizen, it's our job, it's your job, it's my job, it's everyone's job to watch the watchers. And that if we're not doing that, we are failing. I'm failing myself as a citizen, you're failing yourself as a citizen. Was that the only message you have for the general public, or is there something else that you want to call them out on to?
For example, when I was talking about who is watching the watchers, I was talking about the EACC body, and I felt that the EACC body is supposed to conduct some of the corrupt leaders or entity bodies that have been in a position to either precisely corrupt directly or indirectly. Again, some of the officials who are in the EACC body, in one way or the other, for me as a boy, they were also corrupt. So I was like, who is watching the watchers? Yet the watchers are being watched. And also that is also felt that the body itself is even corrupt. Because some of the individuals, some of the officials who are in the EACC body are corrupt. And that is why I felt that how can you identify a corrupt leader, yet you by yourself as an individual, you've been corrupt before? Precisely before, besides talking about watching the watchers, it is also about becoming a leader. Becoming a leader is not just being present in that ballot box, not your name appearing in that IEBC ballot paper. Necessarily, it is about speaking out for your people, speaking about for your rights, coming out, mobilizing people and educating and emulating them with their rights. Because I feel being a leader, it is a self-given norm, a self-given doctrine whereby you can't just lead. Before you lead, you have to lead yourself, because there are leaders who are leading us in the wrong direction. So how are we going to identify wrong, right, and sober leaders? And that is where in my book I've also identified a certain example whereby if your girlfriend is in a position to queue for hours trying to acquire that KFC meal, then how impossible is it of your girlfriend not to queue for long hours to cast a vote? The other example was if your boyfriend is in a position to identify beautiful and ugly women or ugly ladies in social media, then how difficult is it for your boyfriend not to be in a position to identify a corrupt leader and a visionary leader? And that is why I feel that it is easier for us now to speak to our people using examples, using proverbs for them to be in a position to understand, because I also feel that we are now speaking to people who are educated, people who are in a position now to engage so much with their devices. I recall one particular time about now trying to liberate countries. In Congo, I was watching a certain documentary. They were trying to dig a certain mineral. The digger was, he knew there is a certain mineral, but he was not in a position to identify the use of that mineral. And then he was told that the mineral that you dig for hours is in everyone's pocket because the mineral is being used to patch our phones, to make sure that the manufacturing of our phones is of an identity of the mineral that he extract for hours. He gets little amount of money to get out that time is up, or for me to be in a position to get, for them to be in a position to get that mineral. And then now that is where I was drawing my attention to ignorance. If that particular individual was in a position to understand the importance of extracting that mineral, then it is going to be of highest identity to enriching her country. But here we are, ignorant citizens. What matters to me doesn't matter to you. But at the end of it all, what matters to my country directly or proportionally direct interferes with your decisions, because I feel that a decision that an executive is making, or the executive body, now the presidency and their cabinet, because it is their constitutional mandate to give us the directive of this country. If they make the wrong move, then the whole country suffers because of their self-interest moves or their self-interest decisions. And that is where my highest lack of, or my highest interest, because we all have interest, is to see a country, is to see a society whereby if I pay my taxes on health, I don't need to suffer going to the hospital trying to seek for health medication. If it's about owning my own car, I don't need to see a pothole and there's a tax levy on fuel. I don't, if I'm trying to maybe get some good food, I'm not supposed to see a high price of food, yet I'm paying taxes to make sure that there is adequate food, because I'm paying money in the area of agriculture to ensure that there is adequate food in our country. And that is why I feel that if and actually the biggest problem is every identity has been punched upon. They've targeted every area, and the biggest tragedy is on the MSMEs, the small enterprise people, people like us who are trying to survive, people like us who are in a position to steer our dreams and affections at a higher proportionally manner. But at the highest hierarchy, the highest bidder, they're not suffering because they're in the space. They eat the bread, we eat the crumbs. It is very unfortunate.
Okay. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to move from the individual to the interconnectedness that Oba is talking about. That when a corrupt leader makes the wrong choice, it affects everybody. When I'm quiet, I don't watch the watchers, the whole country suffers. So that comes with personal responsibility, social responsibility, and I want to hear more about that from Oba when we come back. Thank you for sticking with us. Welcome back. Still in the same conversation with the author of Rise or Riot, Kenya's New Dawn, Obadiah Kariuki Jr. This conversation has come to a very beautiful place.
Yes.
For me personally, because I personally believe in the interconnectedness of all people and all beings. And I'm starting to get that sense from you that the actions of leaders in power will affect me, and that my actions will affect, say, the watchers, whether I call them out or not.
Yeah.
And that we all have this shared responsibility, which brings me to something you write about.
Yeah.
And you make a distinction between hustlers and sufferers.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what's the difference there.
For example, during the 2022 campaigns, the word hustler was in everyone's ear and probably in everyone's mouth. The person called hustler, we have the chief hustler. You all know him. We also have senior hustlers, junior hustlers, and now to the lowest rank, we have the sufferers. A sufferer is someone who is not in a position to provide 3 meals a day. Now, as I was trying to identify that chart or that paragraph, I was trying to emulate some of the words that they are being enticed for us to fall glory to their own interest. Because the word hustler made this government what it is right now, which is evident, it is fair. Statistically, a lot of people used to say because Mama Mboga and Boda Boda are a key target to this administration, then they're all hustlers. But how can you identify a hustler whose net worth is surpassing $1 billion shillings? How can you identify a hustler whose motorcade is longer than the queue we cast while casting a vote? So how are you going to be in a position to identify the difference now between the chief hustlers who are in the highest rank of this society, now we sufferers? As I've said, sufferers are people who are not in a position to get 3 meals a day. It is in the act from hand to mouth. To the hustlers, money works for them. To the sufferers, prayers works for them. And that is why I was trying to distinguish the difference now between, I was trying to cut the relation of identifying the citizens as being hustlers. What I can emulate as hustlers is we are being hustled upon by the hustlers.
Okay. Which brings me to something else that you say in the book, that the system is not broken. The system is working exactly as it's designed to work.
Yes.
And then you call out to me, when I got to that part of the book, I started to feel powerless, helpless, hopeless.
Yes.
But you're trying, I felt like you didn't want me to go to despair. And you are guiding the reader and whoever is the audience of your book, in this case the Gen Zs, away from despair, and you're steering them very gently to what? Like, how does, when the system is not broken, it's working the way it's supposed to work. When the institutions, you use the word attack in the book.
Yeah.
You attack, you say you're not attacking the church. You're not attacking religion, but there's some things you find issue with the church. You're not attacking the government, but there are issues you find with that institution. You're not attacking higher education, but there are issues you find with that institution, because all those institutions that the youth are traditionally told to look to find their own way, they're not working for them, either politically or economically.
Yes.
When you get me to that point, how do I not lose hope, Oba? What option is there for a young person to not lose hope?
For example, it is true the system has been built to work the way it is working right now. The system has been created for people to loot. The system has been created for people to eat. The system has also been created for people to beg. Now, of course, as you read that book, you might feel helpless, hopeless, and preferably shameless. But you see, this system was also created by people like you and I. Preferably, they sat somewhere either in a boardroom or maybe somewhere in a hotel drinking that expensive wine to create a system to engage the citizens to be beggars. And that is why I call the parting shot that the biggest problem is not even the politicians or the leaders. It is us, the citizens. We've glorified these people and they've been more of a demigod to us. When a politician passes through that street, we all close our shops, our kiosks, just to go and hear their sheer propaganda. The question is, can that politician close his duties to come and hear what you're going through? Absolutely no. And that is why I feel that the biggest tragedy of the system to work the way it is working right now, it is because of our sheer ignorance. That is a key act. We are too ignorant for us to understand what it takes to understand what is good and bad for you. And again, if the system was created by men, by women, then I also feel as we prolong the book, I've also tried to emulate that we can also create the system. For example, I was giving a certain example in the system of SHA. Statistically, they wanted to use around 104 billion system, 104 billion Kenya shilling system to be emulated on a workflow of only 4 billion Kenya shillings. Pure corruption. For example, I was trying to tell you, how can you build a 200 million Kenya shillings home na uweke vitu worth a million shillings? You'd rather create a home of a million shillings and build and na hapo ndani uweke vitu that are worth 200 million Kenya shillings. For example, this particular room, you can unaweza insert gold worth a billion shillings. But imagine create a billion shillings room yetu unaweka mikate. You understand? I'm trying to give examples for you to be in a position to understand that at times it is not about the quantity, it's about the quality. People might say that 104 billion shillings is the best quality, as they per se, or others they say. But the question is, how on earth can you deteriorate a health system, which is the fundamental aspect or a trajectory to make humans live? There are two things that an executive doesn't joke on. Actually, three: defense, education, and health. But currently, right now, we are suffering. For example, I've seen a certain tweet that right now, on the area of health, cancer is in every home. It is either I have it, your brother, my sister, my uncle, or my aunt. But the workflow of the 4 billion shillings that are supposed to be acted upon with a system of 104 billion shillings cannot cater for the needs of someone suffering from cancer. Right now, the number of people who are dying from cancer is more than the number of people who are dying from STIs, as it was recorded previously statistically, or in the area of accidents. Right now, a lot of people are suffering, they are dying from cancer. Yet the system cannot be in a position to give guidelines and solutions to be acted upon on homesteads that of people who are suffering from cancer. Now the question is, the amount of, for example, when when SHA was being introduced to us, a certain statistics was saying that SHA only covers 13% of the total bill of a patient in a hospital. Do you math? 100,000 shillings is a total bill, but SHA only caters roughly around 13,000 Kenya shillings. The question is very simple. Are you going to be reluctant? Are you going to keep quiet? Or are you going to rise? Because I feel those certain perceiving persistive areas that are going to deter us from trying to be acted upon. And that is why I feel that as a society, we need to rise, not just rioting. We rioted, there were no results. Now, can we rise with a different trajectory, with a different statistics, with a different strategy to be able to now encounter some of the problems that we are going through? And I want you to be very keen, especially the people who are so much keen in the area of politics and governance. Right now, the executive, the leaders, they are now emulating a different strategy to now work upon the citizens, because they feel now the citizens have been educated, civically they are morally upright, but economically they are deterring. So if I punch a lot of money to these people, then they're going to resume their duties and see us as demigods, because they feel And you see one thing, in the area of economics, I also feel that kuna mtu huwa anaguza tu haya economy ya nchi inatetemeka. Everything is about the mindset. Not about decolonizing the mindset, as I had earlier stated. Right now, if economically we are going to be invested, if the country or the leadership of this country is going to invest on her citizens economically, they now, because they know if I'm invested economically, then I don't have the right to hear their sheer nonsense. For example, have you ever seen a campaign being conducted in posh livelihoods? You will never see, because in the area, because these tangible elite rich people focus so much in the area of business, they don't conduct their places of relax while talking about politics. They only talk about money and business. Yes.
Talking about what people talk about, there's a place where you say that when poor people are talking about politics,
Yes.
these other people are not. They're talking about investments, economics, and other stuff.
Yes.
And then you've mentioned here in this conversation why sometimes you had to use sexual language. And the book is very heavy on sexual metaphors. So if you go read it, be warned. But it answers a lot of questions. And you say that's because that's the language that, in your opinion, most Gen Zs understand. And it's the language that will get beyond, again, from your book, the distractions. That there's a lot of distractions, and there's a lot of forces trying to keep young people distracted. And so you had to use the sexual metaphors to cut through that distraction and have them listen to you. Which makes me wonder then, how do young people decolonize their minds in that sense and take charge of their own economic futures and like have a say even in these political matters? Because I understand it, politics and economics are two opposite sides of the same coin.
Definitely. For example, I was trying to emulate some of the youth in the area of economics. The state is in a position to understand that some of the things that are making us so reluctant to rely on them is because you don't have money. And therefore, if I'm going to be if I'm going to be in a position to be given money, then I'm not going to bother so much about trying to decolonize my mindset and also try to be in a position to create a new system. Again, as you've said, I keep on telling myself that is 500 shillings worth 5 years of suffering? Because that is maybe the highest amount of money that a politician can give you so that you can vote for him or her. Not unless you're of the highest hierarchy in that village, you might even get 1,000 or 2,000 shillings. But as of an estimate, 500 shillings is what a lot of us, a lot of people, a lot of youth get so that they can cast a vote to that particular leader who has given them money. Now the question is 500 shillings worth 5 years of suffering? That is equivalent to 100 shillings every year. How much can you spend with 100 shillings 365 days? That is a very critical question because we just see now. We don't see the future. The 500 shillings that the person has given you is exact amount of money that he's going to collect in that office that you've granted them the power and they're going to corrupt. Because at times I feel that, as you've said, politics and economics are of the same coin. Now, to them, they're not here to govern. They're here to protect their interest. You'll only identify maybe 2, 3, or 5 legislators or leaders out of 100 who have the interest of their citizens. Again, as you've said, as of right now, the only change is now the young people going to rise and become leaders? The question is, the young people might get into power, but if they've not been in a position to countercheck the system, they're also going to fall glory of a system that was built to corrupt, that was built to butcher, that was built to steal, that was built to cause mayhem, to cause anarchy and intimidation to people of the supremacy who are trying to govern their power. Again, on the other end is right now, as we speak, economically, physically, and also mentally, we are suffering. You see, the only difference between me and that person who is carrying papers on the street, it is because I'm only smart. But mentally, we are suffering. It is of the next extent that I'm also going to carry papers. For example, one particular person was telling me, when you see someone talking to himself, don't laugh. You might be the next patient. Yes.
Thank you very much for watching this episode. Before we wrap up, Rise of Riot, Kenya's New Dawn by Obadiah Kariuki Jr. An absolutely must-read book. Very straight talker, very straight to the point, very honest, very courageous. And the last chapter of this book is about becoming a leader, which is what I want Oba to close for us with.
Yes.
Because you've identified a lot of challenges. You've taken time to think through those challenges while writing this book.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure you've learned a lot in the process of writing the book.
Yeah.
And there's a place where in the book you say that blind rage is sedative.
Yeah.
As the one writing this book. So I assume there was some anger while you were writing the book. So I want to hear all the things you learned from the anger, from the process of writing, from engaging with these problems and our country. And then a leader for me is someone who has a vision for the future, beyond the suffering, beyond the pain, beyond the anger. Someone who can show people this is the path, this is what is possible. So, Oba, when writing Rise of Riot, what did you learn about yourself, about the country, about the youth, about the generations? And what vision do you have for the future now, having from those lessons?
For example, becoming a leader. It is one of my favorite chapters in that book, and that is why I foresaw it to be the last chapter of that book. Right now, there are people that we embody on how they used to conduct their leadership. For example, in America, there's this young man called Martin Luther King Jr., who stood on the steps of Washington, not out of comfort, but out of equality. And he proved that a microphone can be mightier than a gun. When you go down there in South Africa, a certain courageous man called Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu, they led a people whose voices could break the chains of the oppressor. Again, in Tunisia, there was a certain young man called Mohammed. I can't recall the other name. But that young man, he stood to try and embrace the supremacy of the Middle East and the Africa, because he foresaw that the interest of those two particular, one is a continent and the other is a country, is because he foresaw that revolution is not of an aspect of bleeding, but it is also as an aspect of your thoughts. And that is why he was trying to paraphrase his doctrines or his philosophy, and was trying to educate people that liberation is not as an act of shouting in the streets. It is not as an act of fighting, but it is also as an act of thinking. Again, as you've said, what are some of the lessons that I've learned trying to research? What are some of the lessons that I've also undergone? In fact, what is the reason as to why I decided to write that book? I recall very well that having been brought up in a humble background, in fact, the one particular person told me there's nothing like a humble background. It is either you coming from a rich background or a poor background. Now in the area of economics. So I've recalled some of the problems that I've directly gone through. In fact, I've lost few friends who lost their lives trying to collect their thoughts and try to reason with the society and to give a direction on why we are suffering, or rather why they were suffering at that time. I also recall during the 2007-08 post-election violence, I was a very small, tiny child, but I believe that as I grow older, I'm now trying to understand the history behind the 2007 elections. It was brought as a result of politics. And clearly, as they've said, as they've always been saying, politics is a dirty game. But as they say, they love playing on the mud because mud is dirty, so they love playing it so rough. Again, Rise or Riot, it is more of a civic educational work using sexual metaphors. Sexual metaphors, it is highly recognized in the area of English and literature. Of course, if you feel you're not entitled to read such sexual metaphors, you have the authority, because I also tell my readers that you have the authoritative authority to question my writings, because I believe that the late Ngoyo Wathiongo Jr. was also called upon by the Moi regime. He was called upon for trying to question his supremacy. And at the end of it, as I conclude my sentiments, I'd also like to say that when you're given water in a hotel, that is hospitality. When you're given water at home, that is kindness. But when you're given water in a desert, that is sacrifice. And therefore, I feel that at time when you see that someone is in a position to work, to fight for your rights, to fight for your laws, at the luxury of your home, at the luxury of your office, and preferably maybe at the luxury of your matrimonial bed, I feel that that is the highest sacrifice that these people are partaking. Of course, we have the good people and the bad people who are trying to conduct their interest in between so that they can get their share and go home. But we have those genuine people who are trying so much to see a country that is mentally decolonized, a country whereby the citizens can call about the state, being protected by the constitution, being protected by their rights and laws, either in any act of their choice in regards to what they are doing. It is also an act that this is not a matter of doing and not doing, but it is a matter of you have to do it, because regardless of it all, you're being punched emotionally, physically, psychologically, and at the end of it, your pocket is also suffering as a result of the wrong decisions that the people that we elected to get into power for them to be in a position to work for us. And therefore, I feel that Rise or Riot is a book of your best choice. It is a book that is supposed to be in your library. It is a book that is supposed to be in your smartphone. And I also believe that it is a book, necessarily, it is a small contribution to a bigger dream. Yes.
Thank you. The dream is understood it. Civic education. That is a future that Oba really believes in and that he's invested in. And from that civic education comes freedom, comes independence of mind, and comes hope and the belief that a better future is possible for this country. As I've said, I really enjoyed reading the book, and I hope you get yourself a copy. There are so many lessons that I think are going to be of value to any and every Kenyan, and especially to young people. It's addressed to Gen Zs, but I, as a millennial, found a lot of value in reading Rise or Riot, Kenya's New Dawn by Obadiah Kariuki Jr.
Obadiah Kariuki Jr. is my name, 22 years of age. I'm an author, an established writer, a political activist, and a young Pan-Africanist. Rise or Riot is a book that I wrote at the age of 22 years old. It is a civic, educational, political work, and it addresses some of the societal problems that you and I are facing through. So Rise or Riot is a book that you can encounter in bookstores, Kibanga Books, Nuria Bookstores, Africana, Amazon, And if you feel that you would like to engage with the author directly, you can contact me directly on 0741 026 993. And I believe that when we work together, we build together, and together we shall liberate this country.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.